This is Unpaused, a podcast by a family of geeks, bro.
Hey everyone, the Unposit crew was just at Denver Pop Culture Con at the Colorado Convention Center, and we had an amazing opportunity to talk to a fellow gamer. Z Yang is the founder of Serenity Forge, a video game developer based right out of Boulder. And he chatted with us about how games can help us in our lives, something we already knew, how his company got started, and also, maybe more importantly to you, our fellow geeky listener, how you can start making your own video games. Plus, we talk about the latest games out from Serenity Forge and why you might want to play them, because we sure do. So let's get to the show.
We're here with the Unposit crew. I am Rachel. You are?
Hello, I'm Hello.
You're Georgia.
I am Hello.
And you are?
Willis.
And you are?
The dad.
All right, and we are here with, if I may get you to introduce yourself, we know you as Z, but can you introduce yourself, what company you are the founder of?
Yeah, my name is Z, well, or at least, my name is Jingwang Yang, but people call me Z because it's easier. And I'm the founder and executive producer at Serenity Forge.
Nice. Now, I had a quick question because I'm a fan of some certain pop culture. Where did the name Serenity Forge come from?
Well, yeah, so there is the very obvious influence there, but the truth was actually when we were starting off, we were actually all in high school, and we're just a bunch of really passionate kids, and being passionate gamers and game developers especially, we fought all the time. Like, we would fight with each other regarding, no, the text box should be blue, no, it should be red, and then we would just like yell about it. But then at the end of the day, we realized that we're just here because we're really passionate for games, and we want to do something nice, for our world. So we wanted to essentially forge Serenity, and I just watched a movie recently too, so it kind of was on my mind. It wasn't really, new to anyone. So once that name came to be, we're like, wow, that really makes a lot of sense. So yeah.
Well, and obviously anyone who's like me, as soon as I saw your name, I'm like, that for me was like, oh man, not only do you make video games, but Serenity.
Yeah.
But I think that's great too. And talk to me about too, because you said you were in high school when you guys started doing this.
Yeah, so I actually started game development at a pretty young age. I built my first computer when I was 6 years old, and then I got into programming when I was 10. Both my parents were engineers, so it kind of helped a lot. But then throughout middle school and high school, I kept on doing art and started writing my own music just for fun, just hobbies on the side. I didn't have a lot of friends, so it's one of those things where if you don't have friends, you kind of do stuff by yourself. But then when I was 18, I decided to kind of teach myself programming some more, C++ at the time. And yeah, I mean, the first game that I wrote was purely by myself, programming, art, everything, and never went to a class for programming myself. So that's kind of how it came to be.
That's amazing. Like you didn't even go to like classes for it, you just kind of developed it yourself?
So that's the funny thing. So when I was in college, I did technically go to these classes. I went to CU Boulder, but basically I just looked online and found their schedules. I didn't sign up, didn't want to spend that money, and just decided to sit in the back of the class to kind of leech the knowledge. And professors don't care. They're happy that you're actually there to listen to them, because most of their students don't go to class. Anyway, I even took some midterms just for fun to see how I would do, and stuff like that. But it gave me enough knowledge for me to get started. And nowadays, our team has grown to a size where I don't actually do a lot of art and programming anymore. We have much better people who can handle that.
Does that make you sad at all? Like, I have that too. Like, I've gotten to the place where, because I do social media, and I do have to hand it off quite a bit. So I'm not elbows deep in it. I'm mostly kind of helping manage the people who do it. How is that for you? Is that kind of hard, or do you still kind of do it on the side?
Oh, it's very hard. So for the past couple years, it's actually been a little bit difficult for me to handle a lot of the fact that, I don't get to be a creative anymore. I just do taxes and do payroll all day. Like, that is actually a little bit hard for me to get a hold of, like, mentally. But so recently, I actually we did some restructuring in the team. I'm a lot more involved in writing now. I'm a lot more involved in design. I'm actually a lead designer behind some of our new projects that we haven't announced. In addition to that, there's just a good amount of like jumping on different projects and being involved in the creative process that kind of brings me back to why I wanted to do this to start with.
Nice. So, kids, actually, remember that game I was sitting and playing yesterday?
It's
Half Past Fate. Half Past Fate was the name, and he actually wrote the dialogue that was happening where people were talking back and forth to each other. Yeah. Georgia, you wrote this question. Can you ask that question?
How long did it take for you to make the game?
Yeah, so The King's Bird is actually probably our longest title, despite the fact that it doesn't look like much. But so the thing with the game is we started, I think, back in 2014, summer of 2014, and one of our programmers was like, "Hey, I want to make this game," and he just started tinkering around, and we just let him do it. And then and he does it like on the side while the rest of us are working on other larger titles. And then our art director Kirsty was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I guess I'll do some art for it." And then the two of them just like she kind of does it like a day every week kind of work, and then our programmer was doing most of the work. And then 3 years down the line, we are looking at a pretty solid game at that point. And then we had an investor who came by and was like, "Hey, how about I give you this amount of money for you to really like toss a bunch of people from your team to actually fully dedicate it to it?" I'm like, "Okay, sure. I mean, we'll take the money." So we took the money and then used that funding to actually shift our team resources to this project. And then a year after that, we finally finished the game. So it came out last year on PC and then this year on all the consoles.
So is that pretty typical, like to say, because you said that was might be one of the more longer development games. How long does it, on average, take to develop a game from start to finish?
It heavily depends on a couple of factors. Number one, how large the game is, and number two, what the team is like. I mean, for Red Dead Redemption, that took them it took them 7 years or something like that for 1,500 people to be working on that game. And then you look at a game like ours that are smaller. We only have 13 people in our company, so 4 years. That's pretty much the longest. I mean, I think our shortest game, Pixel Galaxy, took about 8 months for our company to work on. And then at the same time, you have nowadays games as service like League of Legends or Overwatch, where these games are never finished. Minecraft is another great example. Yeah.
Willis, you had one.
What does it take to become a programmer?
So I'll comment mostly on the specific steps, because ultimately what really matters is your drive and your dedication. Programming is not a very easy field to get into. I mean, there are harder fields like physics, but programming is definitely one of the higher ones up there. In terms of education, unfortunately, Colorado doesn't actually provide a lot of great education when it comes to game development, but there are a number of very good schools here. Like, for example, DU has a very strong game dev program there in conjunction to their programming. I like to advertise for them because their capstone professor is a really good friend of mine, and we work together on one of our games. And then CU Boulder also has a pretty good programming program, just in general, School of Mines, some of these tech schools. But ultimately, for me, it was just to find the resources online. YouTube is such a phenomenal resource. You don't have to pay a penny to make a game nowadays. You can download game engines like Unity or Game Maker or RPG Maker, where they're 100% free, and you can just download them and start making your games. I made my first game with a custom engine that I had to write myself, reading, a book about 2,500 something pages to learn about graphics programming, working with the PC hardware. But nowadays, you don't have to do any of that, and that's the beauty of education. So, yeah, I recommend just going online, downloading Game Maker or Unity, and then just literally Google, how do I make my first game in Unity? And then you'll find 1,000 different videos on how you can make your first game.
I have a feeling we're going to be working with their computers, make sure you guys have enough RAM and everything to do all that stuff. They're all like, seriously, if you guys could see it, they're like doing the little, their hands.
But going back, so making a game like King's Bird, that's not just a cheap download site, is it? It just took something more, right?
So that's the funny story. The King's Bird was made in Game Maker, which is a free engine that we downloaded, and so that's how we first did it. Before we got that funding, like I was talking about earlier, the game was 100% just a hobby project that one person was working on. And then once we got the funding, we rewrote the entire game in Unity, which is another free engine, and actually every single game that you saw was made in Unity. All of our games are in Unity. We're looking at shifting to Unreal as well, which, by the way, is also free. So that's the beauty with the game industry, is that pretty much there are no paid video game engines anymore that's being used. So if you want to start making games, just download it and start working on it.
With the resurgence recently in the past, I'd say, decade of independent developers, not the AAA titles, and there's in the past, I'd say, since the Switch has launched, a massive amount of smaller indie awesome fun games hitting the market every week. How do you avoid getting lost in all of that?
Yeah, it's actually a really difficult topic. I mean, I'm here, so that's pretty obvious. This is one of the steps that we're taking, and also just making games for somebody. I think that's really important. I think a lot of people who get into the game industry has this idea that I want to make the next big thing. I want to make the biggest game that everyone can play. And what happens when you make any kind of art that is the largest one, that is the most have everyone enjoy it, oftentimes is that you find the lowest common denominator, and then you end up washing out all the artistic aspects of what you're actually trying to impact. I mean, if you look at really heavily impactful films like Citizen Kane back in the days, or even in modern ages like Wes Anderson films, those films are not made for everyone, and that's why they're genius. And so that's kind of how we approach a lot of things. Sometimes we literally just pick one person and think about what is the perfect game for that one person, and then we just make that game, and oftentimes it'll have a lot more magic to it during the process while we're making it, and then ultimately have a much larger audience.
I think I'm glad you asked that question too, and that you gave us that answer too, because you do look like these kids, they love to play Overwatch, God of War, Minecraft, and I don't know that anyone can ever predict that something's just going to blow up, and where most people are using it and playing it, but it probably was created for that more finite audience, and then it just started taking off by itself.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
I mean, Overwatch especially, it's Team Fortress 2 is not a new game by any means. It's been around and it's free for 20 years now, but for some reason people still love Overwatch. I'm a Zarya main, by the way, so I love Overwatch, and I've always played tanks in there. But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing game, and it caters very much to a specific audience that otherwise probably would never touch a game that's stressful.
So, and I'd like to switch gears a little bit too, but it's a little bit tied to what we were talking about, because I know you did a TED Talk that was about how, I think video games saved your life, basically. And, we love games, but we still do deal with people who will, look at us like, God, he's played games a lot, even as adults? That's kind of weird. Can you talk about what's your kind of philosophy about how video games really can help us as humans, and why they're important?
So stats don't lie, or at least that's the funny common quote that people like to say when stats do lie. But the truth is, games are played by everyone. I mean, 42% of all Americans play games every day. That's crazy to think about. That's about half of the population plays games. And then you look at the fact that it's pretty much a 50-50 even split between men and women who play games. And also, I mean, the stat that there are way more women above the age of 18 playing games than boys below the age of 18 playing games. And it's not a boys club by any means. I mean, these things are kind of nuts to think about, and just how games shape our future. There was a study that was done that showed that for an individual who experienced a very traumatic event, if they play Tetris for at least an hour within 24 hours of witnessing that traumatic event, they lowered the chances of developing PTSD by 80%. And that's just a real life study that shows that how video games are tangibly helping people, despite the fact we're only talking about Tetris. We're not even talking about a game that's actually built to help others. So that's kind of the way that we look at it. A game like Gone Home, which is came out a few years ago, about you playing as a girl who has her younger sister come out to her family in high school, and just talking about the traumatic experience that she had to go through with her and her girlfriend, and the society trauma and all that. Just something like that. Back when gay marriage wasn't even legal, that was a huge step towards shifting our society. It's almost like Uncle Tom's Cabin, all over again from nearly almost 100 years ago at this point. So we're probably more, way more. So that's kind of how I see video games, and there's just a lot of different ways that we're helping people. There's a lot of ways that games shape our society and perhaps could make it even better. I think there's one particular a point that I always talk about regarding games helping our life, and that is, if you look at the typical quote-unquote American dream, right? Like, I have to, get married and have a family and have a, beautiful house and a golden retriever dog and, white picket fence and all that stuff. I mean, ultimately, you're just going to dinner parties and comparing to see who makes more money and who has a better job title. What's your job title? Oh, what's mine? And a lot of that is very external, very superficial. And at the end of the day, what do you really have? Whereas when you play a video game, everything, all the value that you get out of it is intrinsic. When you beat a level, in Pong or in Breakout,
or God of War.
or God of War. Like you're not like, oh yeah, check this out what I just did. You feel happy because of what you did. It's almost like playing an instrument. You're not trying to be the next next Yo-Yo Ma when you play the cello, but you are becoming a better version of yourself, and that type of intrinsic value is something that our society just is not built to provide, where video games come in.
That's really interesting.
Along those lines, have you approached or been approached or know of companies that have been approached by psychologists and psychotherapists for certain therapeutic aspects of the video game? I'm thinking of bioimaging and neurofeedback, which is very similar to video games played with, EKG nets. Have you have any experience with anything like that?
So I guess, I can talk a little bit about what we do at Serenity Forge, although it's not quite that complicated. So we actually work with different children's hospitals, like research hospitals, to create games to give them a sense of freedom and a sense of understanding of what they're going through. We work with a children's hospital in Memphis that focuses on cancer research, and we actually worked a couple years ago to install 3 different floors of displays in their hallways where kids, especially in wheelchairs, can roll out of their room, and we use purely motion control, so you can like put up your arms and fly around as an eagle and feel a sense of freedom while you're going through chemotherapy, because a lot of these kids are struggling with leukemia. They're terminally ill patients between the ages of 5 to 10. That's kind of what we're working with. We also work with researchers who, found different ways to essentially cure depression in a way, right? Because there was a study done, especially in younger girls, preteen girls, where if you're able to detect signs of them developing depression later on in their teenage years, there's actually a certain amount of treatment, mental treatment, to prevent that from happening altogether. And we would build games where it teaches these kids on how to conduct breathing exercises, build mindfulness, and just understanding how to deal with bully situations. And these games are valuable for these kids and for these researchers. And that's just kind of one way that we ourselves are kind of helping in the capacity that we can. We're not scientists, and it's really hard for us to understand more of the brain waves. But I think I talked a little bit in my talk regarding Folded, which is a really good program that kind of helps use a puzzle game to essentially help map out the protein structures that are the very complex protein structures that are out there that exist, for research, and they were able to cure all sorts of illnesses like AIDS and cancer through playing games, and so stuff like that is constantly developing, and we're all the better for it.
Well, let's simplify a little bit too. So even while we might play your games and actually cure our own depression and develop all these kind of things, but obviously we want to just play your games, right? So if you could give us just kind of in the nutshell, I know it's hard, but it's almost like the sales pitch of the 3 games that I think you guys are kind of featuring at the con this year. The first one's Kingsburg. Kingsburg. How would you describe that to a gamer who you're like, here's why you might want to play this game? Yeah.
The Kingsburg is a momentum-driven platformer title. It's very much inspired by games like Dust Force or Super Meat Boy, and also a little bit of Journey in there. You can probably see in the art style. The game features this girl named Quill who is trapped in this kingdom ruled by a tyrant king, and she eventually finds a way to escape the kingdom and then go out there and break the barrier. But then she to kind of let the people go free. But then she realizes that maybe there was a reason why the barrier was erected to begin with. So now you have this kind of a narrative regarding the duality of chaos and freedom and order and tyranny. So you got this. It's kind of like one of those games where you experience a somewhat emotional story while you're being empowered by the mechanics themselves.
That's really cool. When is that one available for the general public?
Yeah, it's actually came out on the PC last year, and then recently, a couple months ago, it came out for all the consoles. So you can get it on PC, on Steam, or on the Switch, PS4, Xbox One.
Well, we have most of those.
We have all of those. Yeah.
How about Once Upon a Coma? If you can talk to us about what kind of game that is.
Yeah, Once Upon a Coma is a psychological narrative adventure game where you play as a boy named Pete who wakes up from a coma to find out that all the parents went missing. So you got to go figure out what's going on. The game is, the longer you play it, the more you realize that maybe the world isn't quite what it seems, and there's a lot of aspects of the world that are just deeply psychological, especially especially when it comes to dealing with bullying and dealing with other people who are just not the nicest people. It's kind of our way to comment on a lot of the issues that we have in the world in regards to depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and just open a conversation, especially for younger kids, to talk about it, to see it happening and be okay about it happening to you and understanding what it really means. I think it's one of those things where society places such a negative connotation regarding, like these aren't real, or this is something that you don't talk to other people about. We don't believe in that, and we feel like this is something that we should address as a society and be more vocal about, what we're experiencing and what others share with you. That'll be coming out pretty soon, a couple of months at this point. It'll be PC and console as well. Yeah.
And then Half Past Fate, I got to play that one a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Half Past Fate is probably our newest title. It is a romantic comedy game. It's very similar to if you take Groundhog's Day or Love Actually and turn it into a video game. It's very, very corny in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it's very feel good. We realize that a lot of games you just gonna go around and kill stuff, right? I mean, that's pretty typical. But and nothing against those games. But at the same time, why aren't we making games that are a part of other parts of pop culture? I mean, there are so many people from all walks of life playing games. We feature a very diverse cast of characters. There are 6 main characters from all walks of life. We feature a very LGBTQIA plus relationships. We feature multi-gender, multiracial relationships. It's just something that we care a lot about, especially being in America, where everything is just a hodgepodge of various parts of the world, and that's kind of what we want to show, and that this is part of our world, and it takes place in a modern day. It takes place today is actually what the game says. Is today is when it happens. Ultimately, the game takes place time-wise over a span of 8.5 years to kind of show you 3 different relationships and how they came to be. One that was 8.5 years, one was 8.5 months or weeks, and then with the last one was 8.5 hours. How they kind of came to each other. So that's Half Past Fate.
And is that one available yet, or is that about to come out?
It'll be coming out before the year's over, and that will be on PC and a couple of consoles. We haven't announced which ones yet. Yeah.
Well, and where can we learn more about where to get Serenity Forge games?
Yeah, so the easiest way is probably on our website, serenityforge.com. You can also check us out on Twitter at Serenity Forge, or Facebook, or even Discord, or just discord.gg/Serenity Forge or something like that. And then the best way to find me, like I'm on Twitter quite a bit, so just at Jinghua Yang, which is my full name, ZhenGhuaYang.
We will thank you so much for letting us interview, and we're really excited to play your games now.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
So, what'd you think? We're chomping at the bit to play some Serenity Forge games, and if you are too, visit serenityforge.com to learn more about where you can just push play. We'll have the notes about the interview up on our website, unpausit.show, plus a video version of the interview where you can see actual shots of the gameplay. And hey, if you liked this interview, tell us about it. Reviews on the podcast apps really help us out and can get us out to do more interviews like this one with Z. And always remember, when it comes to great podcasts, games, or entertainment, just unpause it.